everyone, welcome to SCARE. I'm Taylor, I'm the Youth Programs Coordinator here at SCARE, and today we are kicking off Elevate 1.3, part of our quarterly training series. So thank you for joining us today for this series, and we're going to cover a lot of fun topics today. Today we'll be focusing on children's education and advocacy. So just ways to support your children's education and some tips for advocating for yourself and for others. If you've been part of these trainings for a while, you know that it used to be momentum, and now we've kind of switched over to the theme of elevate. So the purpose for switching over to elevate is just the idea of raising or lifting ourselves up and really improving ourselves, taking us to the next level. So for our momentum training series, we focus primarily on career and just things for like job readiness, all that fun stuff. But for Elevate, we are incorporating some other topics into it. It's like a wraparound approach. So the idea is that we're going to be learning a lot of different skills to help our personal life and professional life to be able to raise us up to the next level and reach more of our goals. And if you have not been viewing our trainings yet, don't worry, they're all on our YouTube channel, so you can check out all of our previous momentum trainings and even the other ones from our Elevate training series as well. They're packed with some great information. Highly recommend that you go back and view them. So before we jump into Elevate 1.3, we are going to review just some of the topics that we've covered in our other Elevate trainings. So in Elevate 1.1, it was Elevate Your Mind. So we went over topics like growth mindset versus fixed mindset. So just trying to get into a growth mindset, tips for that, how to not be discouraged by failures, how to see everything as a learning experience. We also covered mapping an ideal life. So tips for how to map out your ideal life and what you really envision for your future. We also covered setting and revisiting goals. And I know we've done a lot of setting goals in SCARE's workshops. So want to emphasize the importance of revisiting the goals just to check back in, make sure that you're still lined up with your goals. Maybe your goals have changed. If circumstances have changed, just checking in to seeing if there's anything that needs to be realigned. And we also went over tips for giving constructive feedback in a healthy way with some effective communication. In Elevate 1.2, it was on building habits. So of course, we covered a variety of topics for how to build habits. Not only did we cover some of the reasons why you might want to build habits, whether it's for career, personal life, health, anything like that, we also went over some of the different techniques for building habits. So one of them, for example, was habit stacking. So just different techniques that people can try in order to be consistent with building your habits and make it a long-term practice. In this training, we also covered online resources, so things like Khan Academy, Coursera, Udemy, which are all affordable or free courses online. Some of them even offer certificates. So there's a lot of great information on just ways to keep on learning if you're not really into the traditional schooling. And lastly, we went over self-compassion. So as we're on this journey of trying to get career ready and also trying to manage our personal life, our professional life, build habits, reach our goals, everything, it is so important to have self-compassion through all of it. And so that was one of the topics that we covered. And yeah, now we can kind of ease our way into Elevate 1.3. So today's topics, we're going to be covering a few different things. So in general, we're going to go over supporting children's education. So we'll just offer some tips for supporting your children in their academics and some ways to increase involvement in their education. We'll also go over IEPs and 504 plans. So just so you can understand the different education plans that are available and supports for children that might need an additional assistance at school. And lastly, we'll go over advocating. So we'll find some tips for advocating for yourself in advocating for your children. All right, let's jump into it. We're going to start with supporting your child's education. So the first thing to understand is that it is not a one size fits all. Every family, every situation is going to be different, especially if you're maybe co-parenting and your children are going between houses, whatever the situation may be. So I'm going to offer a lot of different tips for you. Not all of them are going to be realistic. It's impossible sometimes to take on everything. So these are just a variety of options to choose from to be able to get more involved and support your children. So overall, it's important to create a learning environment for them. And so one of the ways to do that is just to help them build healthy habits. So this might look like establishing consistent routines, having a set homework time, for example, or set bedtimes. Nowadays, I know everything's on a screen, whether it's work, homework, or entertainment. So it could even just be setting screen time limits for your children, right? And again, it's going to look different for everyone. If you're not able to be with your child all the time, it can be harder to establish the routines, if they're at another relative's house. So just do whatever you can do. Another tip is just helping them build organization skills. So even from a young age, especially getting your children in the habit of using things like calendars, and planners, just to keep track of things. It could even be the form of to-do lists, especially if they have different chores going on, or figuring out time management, right? Because those are things that are really going to help them be successful in the future. So the younger you can start them, it really helps them get into the habit of it. Another great tip is just to have a specific area for them to work at. It can be something small. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. I know a lot of the times we're running on limited space at home. So it could look like a lap desk that they use on their bed, or maybe it's a certain seat that they sit in at the dining table or at the coffee table. And so one thing that's really good about having a set work area is that there's actual science into having our brains kind of like condition that area to be a work area. So if they're consistently working and doing their homework in the same space every night, or the same like chair, for example, it can be a little bit easier for them to transition into that like homework mode since they've already built the association with that area means I have to work. So if you're able to have a small area for them to stay focused and work at, that's also great. So now we'll jump into some tips for getting involved at school. So the first, and I think one that's just really important, is just getting to know your child's teachers and check in with them. So you might not be able to check in physically in a classroom. That can be really hard with scheduling, but email the teachers, introduce yourself, let them know if you have any concerns, check in with them, see how your child's doing in the classroom, right? You might see everything that your child does at home, and our children are also at school for a lot of the day. So teachers also get insight into like what they're doing, how their learning is. And so it could be really good for building teamwork and collaboration between yourself and the teachers. Also, attend school events. So it might be a back to school night or open house, maybe, end of year event, whatever it might be. If there's a school event that's being put on, that's another opportunity for you to be at the school, get to see some other parents and teachers and children, and just get a better idea of the learning environment that your child's at. If your schedule allows, you can volunteer in the classroom or at events, especially for like the younger ones, like elementary school. Teachers really, really enjoy having volunteers, especially when they have so many little ones running around. It can be really helpful to have a parent volunteer that can maybe be an extra set of hands for working with the kids. Or it could be if you're not able to attend during the school day, maybe there's some events, maybe field trips or school dances. Just find ways to volunteer if you can. And another great tip is just to meet other parents. You know, other parents, especially if children that go to the same school, really have a lot of insight into maybe other things that are going on. It can be a great little community and system of communication. So if you don't know something right away, these other parents might be able to help out, and vice versa. You might be able to help them out in some other areas. So we'll jump over to how to increase involvement, not necessarily at school, but with school-related things. So increasing involvement can look like just spending time reading with your child, or maybe sitting with them while they do homework or while they study. You don't even have to know the material. I know it's really tricky to know everything nowadays, but if they have maybe some of the textbooks or if they have flashcards, all you have to do is hold them up, right, to help them study or things like that. Even if you aren't working directly with them on their work, it can just really be nice to be working in collaboration with them or like alongside them. So if you have things that you need to get done, you guys can schedule out, hey, it's our work time. You work on homework and I'm going to work on things for my job, or I'm going to work on paying the bills or checking in on things. So it's just like a nice time to have together and still just be focused and productive. Another thing that's fun, especially for some of the younger ones and older ones too, it can be really hard to understand the importance of things like math and science and why they need to know it. So if you're able to show them real world examples, of course, one of the first things that come to mind is like cooking and baking, right? Cooking and baking is directly related to math and science. We can see how baking powder makes brownies rise or the fractions that are used for measuring cups. So they can see some of the real applications for things like math and science. And also just check in with them about school. I know it can feel like pulling teeth just to try to pry these answers out of them sometimes. But instead of asking things like, hey, how was school? You're probably going to be met with something like, fine, good. So try to come up with some other questions just to dive a little deeper. It could be along the lines of, hey, what was the most interesting thing that you learned in math today or in science? Or what's something funny that happened today? Just other things that happen throughout the school day that can kind of help connect you with them. And also, if they're willing to let you see their work, that's also a great insight to seeing what they're doing in school. Next up, if there are meetings that are scheduled to attend, so things like the annual parent-teacher meetings, maybe IEP meetings, I think it'd be really recommended to attend these. It really builds a relationship between you, the school, teachers, and can really help you to advocate for your child in these settings and just know what's going on, right? You might be able to see maybe how the teacher is if there's issues with the teacher, or you might be able to see how supportive the teachers are. And even if there's any other additional meetings that are scheduled with teachers and principals, highly recommend just attending them whenever you're able to, whether it's on Zoom or in person, whatever you can do. And then some last tips would just be to monitor grades and attendance, especially nowadays, everything is online. For middle school and high school especially, the schools will provide parents with logins so you're able to see if the child is tardy to class, if they're running late. You can see if they're missing their classes. You can see pretty updated grades. So as long as the teachers are entering in things, you can get different grades every single day. If like assignments are turned in, if there's missing assignments. So it just helps you be in the loop for what's going on, because I know, like I said, it can be really hard to get some of this information from your actual child. So just using these systems to help bring you in the loop. And also, like I said, it's impossible to do all of these things. No one's expecting you to do everything. But another great thing to know is that you can set your child up with additional resources just to help support them and help them succeed. So it might look like tutoring or counseling, which is both of those are services offered through SCARE, right? And they might be offered by other community organizations. Things like that can be a great extra support for your student. And also time with peers. So if you're having a hard time, being able to sit down and do homework or study with your child, you can try to find maybe a reliable friend of theirs from school that's in the same classes doing similar things. And that can be a great opportunity for them to have fun with their friend, but also to work on homework or work on studying. So now we'll jump into the real fun stuff. So we're going to go over IEPs and 504 plans. So this is just like the overall summary, but an IEP provides a more comprehensive support and services for students who require special education services. whereas a 504 plan provides accommodations and services for students with disabilities who do not require special education services, but still just need a little extra support in the classroom setting. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into what this really means. So here's kind of the basics. And let me just say, I'm not an expert in either of these. I've been learning a lot as someone who works with youth, and I've attended IEP meetings alongside families. I don't know everything. I'm giving the bare basics, but I also will link other resources that have really great information on IEPs and 504s. So first, an IEP is an individual education program. So an IEP is a legal document that has a student's educational goals and special education services. So IEPs are for students that have been evaluated and are eligible for special education services. And oftentimes it could be something like they're getting pulled from a classroom to work specifically on speech, or maybe they are getting modifications to homework. So instead of doing all 30 questions for math, they only have to do 10 questions for math, right? Could even include accommodations. So if your child is, maybe they have eyesight that's not the greatest, right? If their eyesight's impaired, some accommodations could be them sitting at the front of the classroom instead of the back, and just making sure that that's set in place so the teacher has to make sure that that's happening. So, like I said, IEPs will include different modifications and accommodations for the students to try to help them succeed. On the other hand, a 504 plan, so it's a Section 504 plan, it just lists accommodations and services that a student will get in the regular classroom setting. So these students usually aren't eligible for the special education services that are provided through an IEP, but these students still need some type of accommodation. So 504 plans are a little more simplified, and it doesn't pull them out of the classroom. It's usually things like, well, they can use talk to text for their essays, or they can sit at the front of the classroom, or they need to sit at the right side of the classroom because their right eye isn't great. So they need to be able to see out of their left eye, or, a variety of things. And some things to know for IEPs and 504s. So the first is to obtain an IEP, you just have to write a letter to the school to request a special education evaluation. In this letter, just be sure to address any concerns and struggles and be specific. So anything that your child's experiencing, try to be clear, write it out, and let the school have it. And we'll kind of get into more about what the letter can look like and all that fun stuff. This is kind of just the first things to know. Also, IEPs have yearly meetings to go over your child's progress. It'll go over their goals to see if they've gotten closer to their goals, things need to be changed. Maybe they need more support in an area or less support in an area. So these meetings happen every year just to kind of do an overall evaluation. And then typically students will go through a full evaluation every 3 years. So that's like a very comprehensive, in-depth evaluation, just to kind of like make sure they're still completely eligible for these IEPs. And with notice, other people can attend these meetings with you. IEPs and meetings with the school are so intimidating, especially if you're not too sure what it all means, or you're not really sure the right things to ask or do. So you can bring tutors, you can bring your child's therapist, you can bring advocates, or just other family members. But since this is a legal document, you just have to be sure to give the school notice so they can document who is in attendance at the meetings, and all that. Other things to know are that IEPs and 504 plans are provided at no cost to parents. So the public school district in your area is responsible for the costs. And don't worry, if your child is homeschooled or goes to a private school, you can still get an IEP through the local public school district. And if you're having trouble going through the public school district, you can also go through a regional center. And so I'll provide a list of some of those as well. If your child does go to a private school, there's not really a guarantee that they'll pay for the services, but also know that the public school district that they get evaluated at might be able to pay for some of those services, but there's no official guarantee. So I wanted to give an example of what an IEP might look like. I only pulled about 3 pages from an example one on the internet. This is not anything confidential. Um, but it is pretty comprehensive. It's a packet. I'm only pulling a few of the things so you can see what it might include. So for example, that first page really goes over the assessments and evaluations. So it's just what the people working with him, like the specialists, are noticing. So they might say how the student is responding or how their behavior is or what they're noticing in their work. It's just a place for all the assessments and kind of just an understanding of your child's performance. That second page there um, is basically listing out the services that your child would be receiving, and then who it gives all the breakdown of it, right? Who is providing it? How long are the services? How often are they? Is it going to be in the classroom? Is it going to be in a separate classroom? And so it gives all of that kind of breakdown. And it'll differ depending on your student, their needs, their abilities. All of this is going to be completely on a case-by-case basis for what it looks like. So this is just an overall example. And then that third page is the annual goals and objectives. So the school and the specialists will help, and yourself, you're included in these meetings, will help to establish goals for your student, just to see what could be achieved in this year, what you guys are working towards, right? So it could be, reading a certain amount of words per minute. It could be pronouncing, longer words, you know, with like with no mistakes, whatever it may be. It's going to be different depending on the levels, but it is going to be a very specific goal and kind of understand where it's coming from, what the current levels were, what we're aiming to get, and then also just like throughout the year, kind of break down any progress. So you can even see like it has like the short-term objectives, right? So that's kind of like not only are we trying to reach this goal in one whole year, but here's what we're trying to do within even the quarters, right? So in January, we're trying to do this. By March, your child should be able to do this. By June, your child should be able to do this. And so it's just kind of a breakdown of all the goals. And all of these things will look a little different depending on your child and the schools. So this is an example of a 504 plan. It's much more simple than the IEPs. It will still go over like some assessments or some evaluations, observations of the student. So understanding why it is that they need accommodations and what the needs are. And then it'll be a breakdown of what those accommodations will actually be. So while IEPs might be modified more for the student, right? It could be homework modifications, test modifications. It could even be the student is being pulled out of the classroom, working in other classrooms. 504s are pretty much all in the same classroom still, just the general education setting, but they might just have access to more things. So if your child has trouble typing things up, then that's where we'd use something like talk to text for the computers. Now it'd be an accommodation that they can get through a 504 plan. Or maybe it is something like closed captioning on videos, right? Making sure they have headphones in class, or if they're taking math tests, maybe they're allowed to have calculators. So there's a whole variety of the accommodations that can be provided, and it'll differ from school to school. So this is just a general idea of what it might look like to see the differences between the IEPs and the 504 plans. So as I said, I am not an expert in any of these, but I'm trying to give just the basic informations because I know a lot of parents don't really get to learn about these things until they're thrown into it. So hopefully this provides some sort of basis either before or during the IEP process. And so I just wanted to show you guys some of the resources that are linked. These will also be linked in the YouTube description box under the video, but one of them is this Acorn to Oak Trees workbook. And if you haven't heard of Acorns to Oak Trees, they're a great resource. They're another nonprofit organization working with Native families. Um, and so if you're eligible for it, they will work with families that have children with disabilities. They have an IEP advocate who can help attend the meetings, ask the questions, and just help parents and families to understand what all of this really means. So this little packet, this workbook, has a great breakdown of the laws that go into IEPs and 504s. It goes into the differences between IEPs and 504 plans. And then it also goes over how to obtain an IEP. So it gives you the process for what you need to do. It even gives the timelines, right? So you can expect within 15 calendar days this, or within 60 calendar days this. And it gives you an idea of some options to take if you do get denied. Something that I really like too about this is that it actually has a letter template for reaching out to the school. So if you have concerns about your student and they don't yet have an IEP and you think they might need one, this is a great template to use. I think they offer a couple of them, yes. And so it just gives you the tips and it gives you the words to use. So that way you don't have to come up with everything yourself. You can just kind of tailor it to your needs. So entering in the information about your actual child, any concerns that you have, what support you think they might need, and if they can get evaluated. And then they also give a guideline of like what to expect after the IEP is written, you know, implementing the IEP, and just some of the breakdowns for like the differences. And so this is a really great resource. I'm not going to go through every single detail of it, but I wanted to let you guys know what's in it so that way you guys have the option to go through it. Next, I did want to show you guys also, this is also put together from Acorns to Oak Trees. They put together a full list of regional centers in California, I think, but it has a lot in Southern California. So if you're not able to get services through public school or get the evaluation, you can always try to go to your local regional center and they may be able to do an evaluation and help out with the IEP as well. So this just has the resources for how to find them, what's in your area. It even gives the phone numbers, the links, all that fun stuff to help set you up there. And now lastly, let's say you do finally get that IEP for your child. This is a great resource for breaking down what each form of the IEP really means. So this goes through everything. So it has a lot of background, what it means, but the thing that I like about it is that it actually breaks down different sections that are included on IEPs. So it gives information about what the meetings are, what each section is there for, and it specifically points out everything. So this is actually a great resource too if you're looking into the IEP process, just understanding what it really entails and what can be offered. So this has a lot of great information. But again, I'm not going to go through every single slide. There's a lot of them here. I just want you guys to see what resources are out there to help you learn and hopefully be a little less intimidated by IEPs and 504 plans. All right, thanks for hanging in there through the IEPs and 504 plans. I know it's a lot of information. We will switch over to advocating for yourself and your children. So what does it mean to advocate? Advocating includes actively supporting or defending a cause. It includes speaking up, raising awareness. It includes taking action to bring change, and just in general working to protect the rights of yourself or the rights of others that might not be able to advocate for themselves. So we're going to go over a lot of tips. It's going to be overall the same, but some slightly different tips on whether you're advocating for your children or yourself, and just some sample kind of conversations for advocating. So here's just the general tips. You'll see this come up for the next few like topics also. But understand the needs and goals for advocating and like what you're advocating for. Prepare in advance what you're advocating for, and research whenever it's necessary. So you can research if it has anything that has ties to the law, understanding the laws that are at play, that might be able to protect your rights. It could even be just researching tips for how to navigate the advocating. And then when you are advocating, just clearly communicate your points. And then once that happens, follow up to make sure that whoever it is that you're talking to, that they're following through on any changes that they say they're going to make. So first, we'll kind of dive into advocating for your children. So there are a lot of circumstances that you might need to advocate for your children. It's going to vary depending on situations and everything that you're going through. Here are some of the common topics that might need some advocating. So it could be for your child's school and education. It could be in a healthcare setting, making sure that they're getting seen or that things are being addressed with their health. It could be during community activities. You could advocate for them if there's any safety issues, any developmental concerns, or for just family arrangements. So advocating for your children, advocating for your child can ensure that their voice is heard and needs are met. It's especially helpful when your child doesn't have the skills, confidence, or authority to advocate for themselves yet. So I really liked this quote, just because it can be really intimidating when you have to advocate in these settings. But just remember, as a parent, you are your child's first and most important advocate. Speak up even when your voice trembles. So it doesn't matter if you do it with fear, as long as you're doing it, and that is like half of the battle. So here are just, again, some general tips. You'll see a lot of crossover in these tips, but some of the first steps might be to just get informed about the situation. Understand what's going on. Why do you feel like you need to advocate for your child? If it's stuff with school, getting all the information about the situation. And then just know your rights and your child's rights with it. If you need to learn more about the system or the topic, so like I said, you might want to, if it has to do with education, you might want to dive into certain laws that might come into play with this, or just recommendations for advocating in an educational setting. The internet has a ton of great resources and can be really good for just learning and helping you prepare for advocating. And the great tip is to document everything. So if you are reaching out to the schools, teachers, if it's emails, phone calls, whatever it is, try to document it as best as possible and make sure you know where it's at. So that way, if things do get escalated, you have that paper trail of everything that you've been doing to try to support your child, and everything's in place. You can really have that presented to whoever it may be. Prepare to advocate in the system. So if you have everything, you know the information, you have documentation, you're feeling ready, just prepare and know like maybe who you need to talk to, the best way to go about it. And of course, I really recommend whenever it's needed, just lean on your support systems in your community, right? You're not the only one who's probably going through whatever the situation is. And there's probably other parents or other people in your community that are going through something similar. So try connecting with them. You might have tips for them. They might have tips for you if they've already gone through this whole advocating process. And it can be just really good to kind of keep you sane and keep you in line. It helps you remember what you're fighting for. And then the next step. So you've done a lot of the preparation. You understand what you need to do. You know who to go to. So now, let's say you have a meeting scheduled with the school, right? You want to make sure you're starting with clear, calm, and assertive communication, which is important. I think the other end also needs to feel respected and understand exactly what's going on. with advocating. It helps them be able to find a solution to whatever the problem is. Also, it really works to build relationships and collaborate whenever you're able. So I keep using school as an example because that's the realm that I'm in mostly, and it's also really common place that parents need to advocate. So building relationships and collaborating for the school setting might just look like, again, just checking in with teachers more, knowing who the principal is, having them know who you are, right? So then you can all kind of be a team to help support your child. Of course, be persistent and follow up. So after that initial meeting, be sure to check in to make sure that there are changes that have been made or that there are things that are going to be in place. And if that still isn't going the direction that you're hoping, just know when to escalate the communication to the next level. So maybe you start with reaching out to teachers for, let's say, extra support for your child. If the teacher's not following through or they're not collaborating very well, then we might think, okay, well, now is an appropriate time to go to the principal, right? I tried talking to the teacher a couple times. That's not working. Let's try the principal. So now you go to the principal. Again, if you're not seeing the change that you really want to see, now it might be time to escalate it. So it's up to the principal taking it to the superintendent. If it's like if it's a really important problem that's coming up, the superintendent also deserves to know. So just knowing when to escalate it to the next level just to help take care of the situation. Who I know can be really intimidating to advocate for your child, and sometimes you just can't find the words, especially if you're not familiar with how to advocate. So I just wanted to provide a super basic prompt. It can be tailored to different situations, but this is mainly for if you're in a situation where you're asking for more support for a student. So I might start off with, well, thank you all for being here today. I appreciate the work you've done so far to support my child. I'd just like to talk about some concerns that I have about how things are going and discuss the possibility of increasing support. Right, so this is a great sample of an intro. It starts off with gratitude and respect, but then it also is very clear about what you need to discuss. So then we jump into the next section. Based on what I've been seeing at home and what's been coming home from school, I don't believe he's currently getting the level of support he needs to succeed. I've noticed XYZ. So it could be, I've noticed incomplete work, or I've noticed a lot of frustration, or behavioral issues, or falling behind in classes. Whatever it might be, just be sure to put your specific concerns into the communication. Next, it would jump into more of like how you want the changes to look. So I'd like to look at increasing support, particularly in reading or social skills or classroom behavior, whatever it might be. Then offering some examples of solutions to this issue, right? So this might mean more time with a special education teacher or an additional aid support in the classroom or more targeted interventions. So far we have starting off with the gratitude and the clarity for what you're discussing, addressing the actual concerns that you have for your student, and then thirdly, addressing what you think are some possible solutions, right? So in this, we see the clear solution of increasing support with special education teachers. And of course, the school side of it would maybe choose the more specific, you know, answer for the support, but it just helps you to know what is possible. And then once you do that, you can transition into kind of like asking to hear from the other side. Right. So, oh, I'm open to hearing your thoughts as well, especially since some of you see him more in the day to day. What are you seeing? What do you think might help? Right. So again, you mainly see your child at home. These teachers oftentimes see them throughout the day, every day. Right. So it is important to ask for their input and see, maybe they're seeing other things that you're not seeing. Maybe they have ideas already for how this child could get more support. So just asking for their opinion and their thoughts on the topic is really respectful too. And then lastly, you'd conclude with, I know we all want what's best for him, and I truly appreciate your efforts, but I want it noted that I'm requesting additional support and I'm willing to work together to adjust the IEP so that it better meets his needs. So it's really important also to conclude, again, like in a respectful manner, but also very assertive and clear of what you're requesting and why you're requesting it. So it kind of just ties everything together. And I think, especially in the first rounds of communication when you're trying to advocate, I want to make sure that you're not uh, using words that are maybe more aggressive or attacking, just because sometimes that can slow the process down. So that's why I wanted to give even just like a sample for what it might look like to advocate for your child in an educational setting, right? Because it can maybe make things a little bit smoother and done a little quicker. So now we'll kind of transition into just some general tips for advocating for yourself. And again, I know it's going to sound super repetitive, but a lot of the tips for advocating do overlap with how you advocate for your child, right? Just might be slightly different in how the approaches are. But there are also infinite situations in which you might need to advocate for yourself. Every situation is different for everyone. So here's just like some common ones. There's probably some other ones that are not on this list that could really benefit for you advocating. But it could be you're advocating for yourself in the workplace. Maybe it looks like asking for more hours or a raise. Maybe you're advocating for yourself in healthcare, right? Requesting that your doctor notes that you are bringing up these issues and they're denying whatever the further testing is. It could be legal issues, it could be financial matters, education. It could be setting boundaries in relationships and friendships. It could be with public services, right? If things aren't coming through the way they should. Or it could even just be advocating based on your identity and inclusion, right? If you're experiencing something that you shouldn't be experiencing, that's a good place to advocate for yourself. So again, there's going to be a lot of overlap, but here are just some general tips for advocating for yourself. Especially if you're advocating for yourself, it is really important to keep in mind what your value is because you are very valuable and worth advocating for. And so I think sometimes it can be easier to advocate for others because it feels like a little bit stronger, or maybe a little more protective of them. And it can sometimes just be harder and a little more draining to advocate for yourself. So just know your value and the importance of what you're advocating for. Next, just understand your rights and what options are actually realistic for the situation. So if let's say you're asking for a raise at work, let's say you're making $20 an hour right now, you want to make sure you're giving a realistic option for increasing your wage. So if you're trying to get paid a little more, it might be unrealistic to go in there to a meeting and say, hey, boss, I'm currently making $20 an hour. I'd love to make $50 an hour. Can we make that happen? Right? Chances are that's not going to happen. So just keeping in mind what is realistic given the situation. So that way it's just more successful outcome. Also, again, just prepare information and documents in advance, especially, if it has to do with anything legal, financial, whatever it might be. Just making sure that you know all the evidence basically to back up what you're advocating for. So if you're asking for a higher pay at work, right, back it up with all the work that you've been doing. Right, you can have a letter written out with a list of the additional tasks you've taken on, or time at the company, whatever it may be. So just to have all that prepared to be able to bring it to the table when you are actually advocating. And once you get to the meeting, of course, just try to have clear and assertive communication. Make sure they know exactly what it is that you're asking for in a respectful way, but while still being assertive, right? So just making sure that they know that you're serious, that this is something that you are really advocating for and that you really find important. Any of that communication or anything throughout the process, just keep documentation of everything. So again, whether it's emails, paperwork, files, anything that could be of use for this whole process of advocating, keep that on hand. If there's email communication, maybe have a separate email folder where you can, you know, toss them off. That way it's easy to find, or print them off so you have them on hand. Of course, sorry. Of course, follow up and be persistent. So sometimes people take advantage of, they'll hear out someone, but then they think, oh, well, this person's going to let it go. They're not going to keep pushing. Wrong. This is where you need to follow up and be persistent. So if you are trying to get that higher wage and you really, really deserve it, you think there's enough, you think it's realistic, you think that you deserve it, you think that there's enough evidence to show that you deserve this higher pay, right? Follow up. So if your boss kind of says, well, we'll see, we'll check in a few months and see what we can do, then go ahead, check in with them in a few months, see what they can do. Follow up and be persistent. I always love that saying, that squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? If you don't ever ask for a raise, then maybe you don't get it. And lastly, just get support from others or from agencies whenever it's needed. So again, you're not the only one who's probably going through it. There's others in your life who are most likely going through similar things, and they might have some insight and some tips for how to go through the process. Or in general, it might just be nice to talk to other people who are going through it, right? It helps you feel supported and knowing that you're not alone. And so similarly, I just wanted to give a quick little example for what it might look like to ask for more hours at work. And it has a similar format of just being clear and respectful in the introduction, being clear about what you want to talk about, your concerns, the solution, asking for a little bit of feedback, and then concluding with the concerns again and the solution. So if you're asking for more hours at work, it might look like, thank you for taking the time to meet with me. I wanted to talk with you about the possibility of increasing my hours. I'm currently working 20 hours and I'd be open to 25 to 30 hours a week. I believe I can add more value by taking on additional responsibilities or helping cover peak times. For example, during the last few weeks, I've stayed late a few times to help finish up tasks, and I've noticed there are often gaps in coverage during the weekend afternoons. So I think having more availability for me could help the team stay on track. Right, so that's an example of it. It shows the actual evidence for where you can actually get more hours, right? If you're filling in gaps in coverage or having to stay late to finish up tasks, those right there are evidence for why you could be scheduled for more hours. And then lastly, concluding with, what are your thoughts? Are there any opportunities coming up where you think I could be more involved or get more hours? Thanks again for considering this. I really value working here and I want to keep building on this teamwork and collaboration that we have. So again, you're seeing the same themes of just how to communicate clearly, respectfully, but still be assertive, that they know exactly what you're asking for. And I'm hoping that these templates and these kind of like examples can help you find the words for how you can advocate for yourself, even in other situations. And remember, advocating for yourself or for your child, it can be a lot of work. And especially if you're not getting the outcomes that you're hoping for, it can often feel really draining or defeating. So I know it takes a lot out of you, but that's why it's so important to lean on your support systems. Remember why you're advocating in the first place. Take breaks whenever it's needed, and then celebrate every win, no matter how small. So maybe you've been reaching out to the school for months and haven't heard anything. And then, hey, someone finally reaches back out to you to schedule a meeting. Hey, even that meeting right there is a small win to celebrate, right? Because it's one step closer to getting the outcome that you deserve. And so it's really important to just practice self-care throughout the whole advocating process, just to keep it from completely taking everything out of you, right? So building on that strength and just continuing to advocate can really help get like that successful outcome. And on this ending quote, self-advocacy is not about being loud, it's about being clear. It's about knowing your worth and standing by it. So again, thank you for joining us today and just going over more tips on not only just some tips for advocating in career life, but just how to support our children more and advocate for them. Learning to manage our own personal life really sets us up for success in our professional life. The two are so intertwined, whether or not we realized it. It could be personal life. If there's a lot going on, it'll kind of seep into our professional life. We won't even understand it's happening. We won't even know. So, gaining the skills to be able to manage both realms of our life is really helpful. And this was just my friendly reminder that there are links in the description box below that have great information. Right, so that's where you'll find the IEP workbook that has all the information on IEPs, 504s. It has the sample letters for how to ask for an IEP. It has what to expect during the process, all of that stuff. There's also a link to the packet for with the regional centers around California and Southern California, where you can get IEP evaluations from the regional centers. And lastly, we also have linked the IEP one page at a time slides so you can see the full breakdown of what basically every section is on an IEP, what it means, what it's there for, and just understanding what that really intimidating IEP packet really is. But thank you again for joining. Just a reminder too to fill out the survey using the link in the description box below. For tribal TANF folks, make sure you get approval from your career worker to get hours for this. And when you fill out that survey, that helps us here at SCARE confirm that you got the hours and that you did the work. So it's really important to fill out that survey. Otherwise, thank you again for joining and have a wonderful rest of your day.